further now with Patrick Gathara. He's a strategic communications consultant and joins us live from Nairobi as well. Thank you so much for being with us on the program, sir. Now, many protesters have been saying, at least the ones who support the leading government, they feel betrayed by the government that they voted for. Is that a fair assessment to make?
I think that it is. Obviously, the current president went on, during his campaigns, made a big deal about sort of representing what he called the hustlers, and that he was campaigning on behalf of the downtrodden, of the poor. And once he's in power, we've seen sort of him governing in a very different way. So he has set out to a finance bill a few months ago to fund his budget, and it is full of tax increases. He's doubling taxes on fuel, and this is going to hit, the poorest the hardest. And I think many have concluded that his rhetoric during the campaign is not really matched by his actions in government.
Right, and just give us some insight into how bad the situation in terms of economics is in Kenya, because many countries across the world, as we know, are facing a cost of living crisis. Are there any underlying issues that further triggered these demonstrations?
Well, the cost of living crisis, you're right that it is a global problem. But in Kenya, there is people who are feeling it more acutely because it's also accompanied by a debt crisis that we have. The previous regime, of which William Ruto was the deputy president, really went on these borrowing sprees, dug us into a huge debt hole that right now we are unable to climb out of. So lots of the payments for much of the infrastructure expenditure that was done in the last 10 years are coming due now. And so there's sort of, I guess, a perfect storm of circumstances that sees a government that really requires to raise revenue to pay off debt, but at the same time doing that is going to be squeezing people at the very time that prices around the world for essential goods are going up. So right. I think that's where they're kind of stuck. I'll just say one thing about the protests themselves. There's two phases to them. They initially were called as protests against the election. And they didn't really get much traction for that. Raila Odinga was saying he had been robbed during the elections, but was really unable to demonstrate that. They have now morphed into protests about the cost of living. And right. You've even seen in his demands, he stopped stressing so much about the election.
So it
and
seems like,
dropped his...
Right, so yeah. What I'm gathering from what you're saying, it seems like Raila Odinga really wants to gather people out onto the streets. But as we know, these protests have gotten very violent before. Just in the previous ones, 15 people had died. Do you expect the violence to continue?
I think it's inevitable that protests will turn violent, both because of the reaction of the state. In today's protests, we've seen really, the major towns being flooded with police, and they're simply trying to, as your reporter said, to keep people from coming out onto the main roads, which in any case, in many towns are completely deserted. I think in as much as there's going to be interaction with police, there's going to be some violence, there's going to be deaths. This is today, as you guys have noted, is the first day of a 3-day protest, and this is going to be weekly, so there's going to be a lot more scope, I think, for violence and for casualties in the coming days. But I also expect that there's going to be, and there already are behind the scenes moves to try and find some sort of political agreement that both sides can live with.
All right, Patrick Gathara, thank you so much for being with us here on the News Hour and sharing that analysis with us. We appreciate it.